changes to the agenda, if any. I'd like to add an item under new business. The first item under new business will be a treasurer / bookkeeper update. That's why Samara's here. She's
okay.
Run down about a couple things. That's the only change to the agenda at the moment that I had. Bruce, did you have any changes to the agenda?
No, I don't.
Gwen, any changes to the agenda?
No.
Okay. Then that'll do us. Scheduled members of the public, we now have Samara Zwick.
Okay.
Unscheduled members of the public, there are none physically in the office and we're online. I should note that myself and Guy Tanza are physically in the office. Everyone else is online. Bruce Mello is online. Gwen Tanza is online. Samara is online. The folks from Fact TV online, and Peter Barris is online. Okay, let's move on to approving the minutes from November 18th. I only had a couple of things, Peter. On the first page under approved minutes, under the minutes from November 4, there's no details. You're probably just missing a sentence that said they were approved as amended, whatever. Do you see where that is?
I'll just look at that now. I think. Oh, right. Not a word.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure it was just, we made some minor amendments and they were approved. There probably was an abstention, as I recall, probably because somebody had been missing the meeting before.
Passed with one abstention.
Joseph probably abstained from it, yeah. So I had that, and then the only other thing I saw on page 1 was down under town meeting in the second paragraph, third sentence, Mr. Mello, you just need to remove the W.
Thank you. Who are you laughing about, Peter?
Me?
I got one other.
And then, hang on one. And then on page 2, under the email section, Peter Myers should just be Meyer, singular. And then the very last bullet point under the email, the from WRC local hazard mitigation plan. At the very end, you say Mr. It should be Mr. Jones will submit the application.
Mr. Jones?
Yes. Saw that.
Okay, I'll find
Those
it.
were the only changes I had. Bruce, did you have any other changes?
Under review traffic, 40 PMH. I think it's down for that.
Oh, yeah. In the whatever third paragraph.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me. I forgot to print the agenda.
Yeah, you know, my fingers got fastened back on the wrong sockets.
Anything else, Bruce?
No, I'm good. That's it. I noticed.
Gwen, did you have any other changes to what we said?
No, you got them.
Okay. All right, then I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes from November 18th as amended. Is there a second?
Second. Whatever.
Seconded by Bruce. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from November 18th as amended signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Negative.
Any abstentions? Okay, then those are approved. Which brings us to our newly added first new business item, treasurer / bookkeeper situation. Samara, you want to give us a little
Sure.
recap or rundown?
Sure. I'm going to keep this as brief as I can. And Dave, if I can't, I don't have a timer handy, but let me know if I'm going over 5 minutes, because I don't want to go over 5 minutes.
I'll give you a little leeway.
Okay.
Boy, I could go to that education.
Yeah. Okay. For mostly for Bruce and Gwen, although Gwen, I'm sure you've talked to Guy, hopefully. We've had one response to Sarah's email that went out to give the listserv for treasurer. And he's a really good candidate. And Dave and I are going to follow up on that and determine the best way if he agrees to bring him on board. There's sort of a two-prong approach to keeping our finances in order that has gelled in my brain. And the second part is to bring in a real bookkeeper, like someone who actually knows bookkeeping and has done a lot of it. And the easiest way to do that right now would be to bring her on as an assistant treasurer, because it doesn't require special appointments, nor the select board's input. And I've already discussed this with Sarah. My thought would be to start with that, but I do not think, given the current market value of what bookkeeping goes for, even in our sort of third world part of Vermont, which is third world in and of itself, is I think I need some leeway to have some flexibility in a salary range. And so what I would propose is that we bring her on a temporary contract, but probably as an employee, depending on what her insurance situation is, because I don't think we should bring on a financial person as a contractor without their own insurance. And I'm not sure what her situation is. But if we were to bring her on as an employee, I would advocate for offering her the current treasurer rate plus a quarter, because I think this 1975 has got to be reviewed in the coming year anyway, and we should just make it an even $20 for an initial period to go through March 1st, because that would bring us up to town thing, and then whoever might be coming aboard as a new treasurer might have their own ideas. But right now, we're in a sort of a crisis situation where Sarah really needs to leave. She has said as much to me, the sooner the better. And from my own experience of trying to pick up a lot of the workload, I will probably burn out if I have to keep it up.
Well,
as I've already done it for 8 years before, and I was not looking to come back full time. So the opportunity, if I sent you the resume, and Guy, apologies, I forgot to CC you. I meant to CC you with her resume, but I think we can manage our current budget to fit her in at a higher rate. If she'll accept it, I don't know. Her billable rate as a contractor is higher than that, but she has said on an initial phone call I had with her that she'd be flexible. So I'm willing to push and see just how flexible. But
I don't have a problem. Let me just initially give you feedback that I don't have a problem with that. I think it's a good idea. Let's just quickly get a little sense of whether we have a consensus on that. Bruce, do you have any concerns with doing that?
None whatsoever. None whatsoever. I like the idea of adjusting the pay. I don't think the pay is big enough anyway, which is a whole different issue. But I totally concur with everything that Samara is saying at this point. And God help, I mean, it's great that we're having somebody, one, that's confident that we can get it, appears, according to Samara. And second of all, it's great that Samara's helping us out. So this is all good as far as I'm concerned.
Gwen, how about you? Do you have any concerns with doing that?
I agree wholeheartedly with Samara. I think she's done an excellent job. I'm looking at the resume now, and it's impressive. And if we can get this woman to help us out, we would really be very lucky. So I agree that the need to work with her salary, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm in.
Yep. Well said.
So Samara, back to you. So sorry to let you continue.
So I will call her tomorrow and see if that's amenable to her. And then she also opened the door. She said, if you guys have any questions for her, please send them. I will happily forward them to her. And then I will immediately email you with her response. And then I've talked to Sarah about this, and she's on board. She has her opinions on pay rates, of course, but hey, she's leaving. So
yeah.
But with that said, I just want to thank you. I am so fortunate to work with such a supportive crew of select board members and town clerk. I really think we're so fortunate in our town. I will briefly diverge and tell you, I talked to someone today in Westminster who used to be the financial manager in Wethersfield, who told me that their select board did away with all the financial people because he thought he could take care of it. And I was,
oh God.
I guess it's the short version. I won't go into the long version, and a gal from Nemrick who lives in Westminster told me they want to move toward having a bookkeeper. Everyone is seeing that really having someone who knows how to actually do bookkeeping and is very important to the financial well-being of a community. So I appreciate your support, and I will move forward. And then Dave and I have an appointment to talk to the treasurer, the one person who responded to the email for treasurer. And after we've talked to him, I'm sure Dave will share that information with you, and we can move forward with that as well. So really, our town has been quite fortunate to have such a positive response.
Amen.
Yeah.
Samara, thank you. Like we've all said, but we'll say it again. Thank you so much for stepping in and helping with all of this. I know you've been trying for a long time to get away from this. We all greatly appreciate the fact that you're still keeping involved and helping us.
Yes, you're civil.
Peter, what was your question?
Just clarify, there's a treasurer candidate and a bookkeeper candidate separate.
Correct.
Wow.
That's
okay.
Correct. And the treasurer candidate replied to the email sent out to the listserv, and it's a town resident. Shoot, I blew the gender mystery. Sorry. And then the bookkeeper is someone who I was referred to through my network of reaching out, the same way I got Louise in when we hired Louise Surwa, who was, I don't think either Shelby or Joe know them as assistant treasurer, but who was our assistant treasurer until she moved to Colorado. So I think, if push comes to shove, we can get some references. I don't think that will be a problem either. So
this is two people. Do I understand right, Samara?
Two people, two different positions. One is not the bookkeeper candidate is not a town resident, so could not qualify as treasurer.
Right. And we'll have, I'll say before we get too deep into a discussion of it, since it wasn't on the posted agenda, we'll have this on the agenda for the next time when we'll have more clarity about all of the situations and probably some action items for us on at least the treasurer.
What to do. Sure.
Okay. But thank you again for your support in going forward, at least with the bookkeeper position, and I will keep you posted as soon as I know something.
Thanks,
Okay.
Samara.
Take
And I'll
care.
tell
Have
you-
a great evening.
You too.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Phew.
Okay. Shelby has joined us towards the end of that discussion.
Yep, here.
Hi, Shelby. Moving on to 6A, I guess we'll still call it 6A, meeting structure. So Joseph's not with us, and I guess I'm not sure if he's joining, but since we are going to be, for the time being, everybody's going to be remote, I thought it would be good, and Joseph had mentioned this last time, it would be worth us probably just refreshing our memories on, it's been several months, I know, but we did actually adopt some additional meeting rules back in August that Joseph had sketched out, and then we had done some editing too, but we adopted quite a few of those. So I guess I just want to remind people of a few of those, merely because the technical challenges sometimes are going to make this more challenging, and we don't want to get ourselves back into a position of stress like we were when we were first trying to do this. So I'm just going to read through and highlight a few of these just for everyone to remember. Well, skip by the physical part, I guess. Anybody who's attending, all members of the board and public that will be attending the meeting remotely will keep themselves muted until recognized by the chair. Actually, it's possible that Joseph is joining us right now. Sorry. Hi, who joined?
Yes, this is Mark Bills.
Oh, hey, Mark.
Mark.
Hi.
Yeah. How you doing, Dave? Sorry I'm late.
Good. No, that's okay. So I'm just starting to go through a couple of things that we talked about a few months ago as far as sort of additional meeting rules when we're doing these online meetings. So the first one is that members of the public and the board, when you're remote and you're on the meeting, try to keep yourself muted, your phone's muted until you're recognized by the chair. I promise that I will go around and give everyone an opportunity to speak on all of the issues, probably to a point that will become annoying if it hasn't already become annoying. Another thing is when discussing issues, the chair will first recognize themselves to speak their opinion on a matter for 2 minutes. The chair will then recognize all members of the board by seniority to speak their opinions for 2 minutes. Following this, the chair will give any member of the public that are present to speak their opinion on the matter if the chair sees fit. I think we discussed at the time, I'm going to use some flexibility with that. I'm not necessarily going to have myself speak first every time. I'm not necessarily going to go around to people in the same order every time, mostly because I just can't remember. And I'm not going to strictly adhere to the 2-minute thing. I think, we're all adults and are mature and we can work within those confines. The general premise, though, is everyone will get an opportunity to speak. So because of that, we really need to be careful not to speak over each other or interject when people are speaking as much as possible, because it becomes, as we've seen, it makes things much more contentious when we're not seeing each other than it needs to be. It creates stress where it wouldn't exist otherwise.
Excellent.
Then an additional point that this makes is when everyone's given a chance to speak, the chair may give all members of the board the opportunity to conclude their opinions in a minute of time. Again, the same thing. I promise people will have ample opportunity to voice their opinions or views on things. We're just going to do it a little more slowly and a little more orderly than we might do if we were all in the same room. A couple more things. For voting, the chair will recognize all members of the board, starting with themselves, then by seniority. I'm not going to do that. Like we've been doing, and there's rulings from VLCT about this. If we have votes that are unanimous, I am not going to go around and do a roll call vote. If we have disagreement on things, we will do roll calls. But if we're unanimously in agreement on things, we're not going to vote one at a time. It just is needlessly time consuming. Then the last thing is when a member of the board or the public's time has expired, they will respectfully conclude their arguments. The chair may remind any member of the board or the public that their time has expired and call for them to yield the floor. Again, since I'm not going to be strict about time, but what I will say, and I'm saying this to myself as much as anyone else, is that we do want to keep in mind that we want everybody to have an opportunity to speak to things. So try to keep ourselves both brief and also pause and give others the opportunity to take over and weigh in on things rather than dominating conversation as much as possible. So I think that it's just good for us to refresh our memory about them and reinstill that these are things that are going to be important when we're all on this kind of wacky, messed up situation. Now I am in keeping with something that I just read. I'm going to go around and say, does anybody have any, Bruce, do you have any additional thoughts on the meeting structure?
No, I think you've done. No, I think one thing I just want to make a point about me, that especially when you get in the explanation about the schools, when we get to that, as I'm explaining it, if somebody wants to interject and tell me something at that point, or have a question, just say, Bruce, and then I'll stop and you can ask the question. That's all I have to say.
Okay. That's a good idea. Gwen, did you have any additional thoughts about this? Gwen?
Sounding good.
I was on mute, so I forgot to unmute it. But no, I have no problem with it.
Not
That's
a bad
fine.
thing. Nobody should ever apologize for having muted themselves. So,
how do you do that? I don't know how to mute it.
Should be a button on your phone that says mute.
Just a minute.
Well, no, if you're just called in, I feel like it's, I want to say it's something like #6 or something like that, but I might not be right about that. We'll figure that out for you, Bruce. I'll look it up.
Yeah, I don't see it on my phone. I'm not looking very hard. I'm trying to look at it and talk to you at the same time, so I just won't talk.
Okay. Shelby, any additional thoughts about this other than just the reiteration of those points?
No, it sounds good.
Okay, cool. All right. Then moving on to 6B, select board terms. So I talked a little bit about this at the end of the last meeting, but for Shelby's benefit and for everybody's, because I really didn't flesh it all out. It was brought up by Doug Wellman at town meeting this last year that he thought that at some point in the past that, and I'm paraphrasing what I believe he was getting at, that he felt that the select board terms as they were currently set up, namely the 1-year term that Shelby is currently filling, was not supposed to be a 1-year term, but actually was supposed to be a 2-year term. So there's 2 points to make about this. One is going back through town reports for the last 12 years or so. Generally, the terms have always been, in recent memory, 3 3-year terms, 1 2-year term, and 1 1-year term. There were a few years where that got messed up and there were 2 2-year terms, but it then got corrected to what it was believed to have, to what the intention was, back to a 1-year term and a 2-year term. But what I will say is, having now mapped it all out and thought about it, I think Doug's underlying point is a good one and a valid one, which is we should not have our terms structured this way. Because the problem of we are allowed to have a one-year select board term, and perhaps it was voted that way at town meeting at some point in the past, but it's kind of a mistake to do that, because what that creates inevitably over time, like it will this year, is a scenario where 3 of our select board terms are up for election at the same time. And if, say for the sake of argument, we can't find anybody to fill any of those terms, we suddenly only have a 2-person select board and we don't have a quorum and we can't even have meetings. And I'm not sure what we'll do at that point. So logistically, in my opinion, and I think Doug's and probably other people's, the way it should be structured is we should have the 3 3-year terms the way we do, and they're staggered so that every year one of those is up for election. But then we should have 2 2-year terms that alternate essentially, so that would create a scenario where we would never have more than 2 positions up for election in any given year. Now, the unfortunate thing is if somebody had brought this up prior to town meeting last year, maybe we could have fixed it then, but we didn't. And the reality is we essentially can't fix it this year because the 2-year term and the 1-year term are currently expiring. We basically, the only realistic way to fix it is to fix it in 2022 at town meeting and have the townspeople vote at town meeting to change the 1-year term to be a 2-year term at that point. And from then, assuming that they agree, from that point moving forward, it will all be good, in my opinion. So let's just go around and see if anybody has any questions or wants to disagree with that premise that I just presented. Bruce, what are your thoughts on that?
I followed you really closely, and you thought it out quite well. You've thought it out quite well. So if I understand you correctly, there's the maximum amount of people, after we straighten it out in 22, the maximum amount of people that would be up would be 2 people.
Correct.
I'm good with what you're saying.
So there would always be 3 people not up for election, essentially.
Don't forget, originally we had a 3-person select board years ago, so I don't know when they changed to the 2-person, but I'm good with everything that you had to say. I think what you're doing, I don't know how Shelby feels, but I think the 1-year term is well, it's a good idea to dip in and test it out, but I think if you're going to make a commitment to the select board, you should make it for 2 years. That's my opinion.
And I'll just, before I move on to Gwen and Shelby, I'll just add though that, and people probably saw Guy, and thank you for doing this, Guy. Guy reached out to, as a person at VLCT, one of the attorneys at VLCT, about the terms. And, you know, it is entirely possible. It's within the town's right to create if you have a 5-person select board, for one of the terms to be 2 years and one of them to be 1 year. I honestly don't know, because I haven't been able to go back far enough to find whether the townspeople did that or not. My only point at this point is I think when we have the opportunity, we should change it just for the ongoing stability of the board. So Gwen, what are your thoughts on the situation?
I think you explained it very well, and I think it needs to be put back originally so we don't have the problem of having to have 3 positions all at one time.
Yes.
Shelby, what do you think?
I mean, I see where it could be an issue. Having a 1-year term when it does happen, I don't wonder how frequently it happens that 3 are up in the same year. But but yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's a pickle if all three were to say we don't want to do it anymore and all three couldn't be filled. I think it's a rare circumstance, and I personally think the only reason I was probably willing the first year to do it was because it was a 1-year term. Not that, I mean, some people might be better with longer commitments than others. And it's not that I shy from commitment, but I have a lot on my plate. And knowing I was going back to grad school, like knowing everything I have in my life, knowing it was going to be 1 year was a huge incentive for me to say, okay, I can get through this year. And it turned into 2 years. So it's not like I went anywhere after the first year. I was like, okay, I can get through one more year. But I do think that maybe the benefit of a different type of person that 1 year term could draw in, who might otherwise be deterred from trying being on the select board. I think the benefit of that might outweigh the potential, whatever it is, once in a decade risk that.
Just to clarify, it would actually be once every 3 years.
Oh, okay, it's once every. Well, but still, I mean,
3 years.
Have you guys ever not had?
Yeah.
Have you guys ever not had 5 people?
Yes.
Yes.
And it was you were at 4 people because of that. Was it because somebody stepped down, or because you couldn't get anyone to fill it?
We couldn't. 3 years ago, we couldn't get somebody to fill one of the positions. We later.
I mean, I'm not totally. For the record, I'm not totally against going back to 2 years and 3 years. I'm just saying that I think there is some benefit to having that 1 year option. But like you said, this year could be, in theory, you could end up without being able to have a quorum, which of course is not okay. So yeah.
Well, and I'll just say that I totally agree with your point, and I do think, like you said, I agree that I think having a 1 year term is a good incentive for people to potentially get on the board in a less threatening environment. I know that it was part of, I think I can speak for him, I think it was part of what convinced Chris Webb to fill an open 1 year term a few years ago, and he then served another term after that. But if it had been multiple years, I'm not sure that he would have. So I think you make a very good point. It's true.
Yeah.
And the reality is, going back, I mean, I haven't gone back and looked at, but going back for quite a while, it has been like this, as near as I can tell. So presumably there have been, prior to me even being involved, there have been a number of times when there were 3 positions open. And to the best of my knowledge, we've never gotten into a situation where we couldn't find at least one person to fill. So it would be a pretty extraordinary circumstance that would end up with us not having quorum. But it is, I guess, this year in particular, given what we'll talk about in a little while about the town meeting situation and stuff, it's maybe a little more highlighted the potential vulnerability of it in this kind of climate, but it isn't necessarily something that I think people have to be terrified of. And the reality is, this is a change, if we are going to make the change, that has to happen by a vote at town meeting. And like I say, there's no sense in that happening until 2022, because we can't fix it if we choose, even if we wanted to, this year anyway. So I think there's valid points in each direction on it.
Yeah.
So unless anybody else have any last thoughts on it, that's kind of where it stands. And like I said, nothing that we really can do right now.
Sure. I would just say that my only other thought would be, if we get to the point where we're like, we need to make a decision on if we're going to propose some kind of change to make sure we don't end up in that situation, I wonder if an alternative could be creating a procedure or a policy as a contingent in the event that there were only 2 people. like where we revert to a 3-person board in the event that only 2 people are elected or remain on the board after 10 years, something. But anyway, but that's a discussion for a later time. But I think there might be multiple ways to attack the issue if we get there and we decide that the 1-year term is important enough to keep. But for now, I think, yeah, all good. It's good to be thinking about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I mean, I haven't gone looking for this nor asked, but my guess is there probably are statutes that dictate what we would have to do if we were in that situation.
I would imagine.
I think because there are lots of towns like we used to be, and there are lots of towns that still only have 3-person select boards, who, quite frankly, have a pretty high likelihood of running into this. So I'm sure that there's state statutes which lay out what the remedy for that would be if we ever got the situation. Okay. All right. So that's all there is on that for the moment, but it's something to keep in the back of our minds for 2022, which I can't even imagine we will ever get to at this point, but in theory we will. Not for anything, just because time moves so slowly anymore. That's why. Okay, moving on to 6C, the recycling site. So we had a little bit of a discussion during correspondence last time about, I guess, a combination of things. Peter Meyer had written to us about asking some questions about what would happen as far as cost things with the recycling site, and also expressing concern about the trash dumping at the site and the general maintenance of the site. At the same time, we also had a letter from Triple T pointing out that they've, on multiple occasions, their guys have tried to clean up the site and close the back door of the dumpster, and Guy has had this experience as well, that we've apparently had some vandals now and again opening the back of the dumpster for some purpose that then creates a mess and also creates difficulty being able to close the dumpster. So we were basically just going to kind of put this on for us all to give a little bit of thought. We've had the discussions. This will be one case where I'll start yammering on about this for a moment. We've had discussions before about putting up game cameras or things like that, and I know I've pointed out before that the way the poles and trees are positioned at that site, there's really not a very good place to be able to put a game camera that would be at all helpful to us, and that wouldn't be so low that somebody could just steal it. However, one thing I did notice when I was going by there the other day that had never occurred to me is, depending on what the leaf coverage is like, across the brook, on the other side of the brook, there are a number of trees where I actually think it might be feasible to put a game camera and have it pointed at the back of the dumpster, which would be what we would want to see. I don't know whose property that is. That's Sonny's behind there.
Oh God.
I'm less opposed to the idea of considering it now that, at least that was to my eye, I thought, wow, okay, maybe we could put something over there that would be useful and wouldn't capture every single car that goes by, because that's also part of the challenge, is not to have it capture so much that the memory card is filled up constantly and it becomes a huge management problem for someone. But so that's just one. It's really the one and only thought that I've had about that since we last discussed it. But let's just go around to see what everybody else's thoughts are, if they've changed at all. Bruce, what's your thinking about the site and what we may or may not do about it?
I don't think my opinions have changed from last time, in as much as we have, 3 months to town meeting if we have one, and we got to see if it's going to be kept for next year anyway. It only gained by one vote to have the dumpster. I know how I feel, but I don't know how anybody else feels, but it seems to be getting more and more people getting dissuaded about having it because of the cost. And that keeps going up and up. And we're up to 22,000 now. And so I guess my opinion hasn't changed. I think to spend money on it right now is probably not such a great idea. But if it's voted on and accepted, then I think that your idea is not a bad idea if you can get Sonny to go along with it.
Gwen, what's your thinking?
I'm not sure because we've got so much problems with this thing. This week, I don't know if anybody noticed, but it was up again when I went by yesterday.
Yeah, it's a mess.
All over the back.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think if we could just get something up there to detour the kids or whoever's doing this, or even people, if they think it's being monitored, then maybe they'll stop just dumping stuff. Something's got to be done.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Okay. Shelby, what's your thoughts on it? I know you're joining a little late on the discussion, but it's not like we haven't discussed.
This isn't the first time this has come up.
Yeah, exactly.
No way. Yeah, no, the last couple times I've gone to do my recycling, I've been really disappointed in how much stuff is just dropped that's just clearly not recycling. And it's like, why did you even bring it here? Why did you put it with your trash? This isn't your own personal free pile, plus nobody's going to take that stuff. Like it seems to be very widespread. So my thought is that, if the town votes to continue the service, having the recycling bins this town meeting day, I think that it would kind of be our responsibility at that point to, even if it previously has seemed cost prohibitive, to try putting in some kind of surveillance, because even like you said, maybe it's just a deterrent because it's there, whether or not we get good enough pictures or images to do anything. At least we're attempting, and by seeing the camera, maybe just its presence alone does something. But I think we're close enough to town meeting day at this point. I think we wait and see if the town votes to continue having recycling, and if they vote to continue, then I think that, I know it's hard and we talk in circles and we don't really know that anything will work, but I think it's time that we tried something tangible, more than just a sign, but really tried something. I mean, game cameras are money, but they're not that much money. They're maybe $60. So, and the batteries will last 6 months. So, I think that's sort of where I stand. Get to March, and then from there, if it's still something we have, I think it's time we bite the bullet and put a little bit of money into some surveillance.
That makes a lot of sense to me too. Guy, what's your feeling about it?
I like the idea of surveillance. I think that's a good answer, because I think recycling is an important part of what we do as a community. The costs are always going to go up, but by the same token, when they go up at the recycling plant, they're also going to go up at the recycling bins. So it's going to be the same thing no matter what, but it's a lot cheaper and less toiling to bring your recyclables to a bin versus bringing them into, or having someone pick them up. As far as the surveillance, we have a number of poles or locust poles, I think, over at the town garage, that even if, to stay on our own property, if we had the bins brought a little closer to the road, we could put 2 poles in the back, high enough out of the reach of anybody that's going to try to get to them. And there's solar-powered cameras. There's different ways that we could actually put that under surveillance. So it's a mixed situation. I think there's only a very small percentage of people who are not cooperating. And it's a shame that the rest of the people have to be penalized for it.
do you agree with Shelby that that's maybe something that we wait to see? Are we continuing with the bins before we start figuring out what we might do?
Yeah, I think that's what we do. We've dealt with it this long, 2 or 3 more months will not make any difference. We'll continue to pick up and do what we have to do. And then at the town meeting, I think there's going to be a real good barometer about what the town is thinking. If they wish to continue with this, they may have to also elect an article to say to expend X amount of dollars for some surveillance, and that could be part of the package.
Hey, Mark, I want to give you a chance to, because I know you've given this some thought and we've talked about some of this stuff before. Do you think, I assume you think it would be feasible to put some poles up in that site potentially, and we might be able to construct something?
Yes, yeah, I think it's worth a try. You know, it's something that needs to be monitored, and probably the camera sounds like a great idea to try. And, you know, whatever we need to do for post, I'd be glad to hear suggestions, and I would give some input. But yeah, I think you guys are onto something that's smart.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Shelby, I mean, well, everybody, I mean, I echo your thoughts that at this point, depending on what people decide in a couple of months, it may become a moot question. But if it's not, I agree with Shelby. If it isn't, and if we do, if the town votes to continue with the recycling, then I agree, we need to really try to do something. And that'll cost money, but that's okay. We'll figure that out.
Not that bad.
Work through doing it. Okay, any last thoughts from anybody on that before we move on?
No.
Going once, twice, gone. Okay.
Nope.
All right, moving on to old business and 7A town meeting. So, for Shelby's benefit, since she wasn't here, we had a little bit of a discussion last time about the current status of town meeting. And at the moment, I had been, before I started looking into it and before I contacted VLCT, I had been under the impression that the legislature had made it possible for towns to do electronic or at least hybrid. Gwen just bounced out and I'm letting her back in just for everybody's sake. So, you know. Hi, Gwen.
I got disconnected for some reason.
Not a problem. So I was just recapping a bit of the town meeting discussion that it's not currently possible for us or anyone to hold a virtual town meeting or a hybrid town meeting. The legislature discussed that, held hearings on it, decided not to act on it. It is also, as Guy's, we all should have seen the exchange that Guy had with JP at, is he also at the Secretary of State's office, about the options for town meeting currently. It does not, and I've exchanged emails with a number of legislators about this as well. No one seems optimistic that the legislature will change anything about this in time for it to make any difference for town meeting. So I think it's fair to summarize what our options are likely to be. And granted, some things might change between, well, things definitely might change between now and town meeting. However, as a reminder, we need to vote our warning at the absolute latest, the January 20th meeting. And I'm not sure we can really afford to wait that long. We probably need to do it at the January 6th meeting. So we need to decide by that point, essentially what direction town meeting is going to take in order to follow one of what I'm going to say are basically three options. Option number one is we would do our entire meeting by Australian ballot.
Ooh.
With an informational meeting a week to 10 days before that, which could be a virtual meeting. That is allowed. Option number two would be we would have a physical indoor town meeting at possibly at the daycare or possibly at Newbrook, which would be a larger location. And then option number three, which is something that Joseph brought up last time, is we could consider having an outdoor town meeting. With the benefit of that, obviously, would be that from a health standpoint and transmission of virus standpoint, it would be, well, from a transmission of virus standpoint, it would be potentially a safer situation, depending on what the weather was like, whether that would be a safer situation for our aged population is debatable, I suppose. But, and I'll kick off the discussion. And again, we're not deciding anything tonight, but I think we need to keep moving towards getting a decision because we're not going to have a whole lot more time. I'll kick off going around by saying, though I was initially very negative about the idea of Australian ballot and a bit about it not being feasible, the more thought I've given to it, and I actually went through and sketched out exactly what we would have to vote on, it isn't as bad as I thought it might be. And I'll say, knowing what I know right now, and given where the world is right now, if I had to decide today, that's what I would vote for, would be to hold a town meeting by Australian ballot. But again, we don't have to decide tonight, and we have some more time. Bruce, what's your thinking about it?
Okay. Well, the Australian ballot would be would be preceded by an informational meeting.
Yeah. So let me just lay out. Let me just describe a little bit.
Rehash the three. I understand the third, but do the one and two again.
So Australian ballot would be, literally we would put everything that we would vote on into a ballot. It would all have to be in the town. But, a lot of it already is normally. We say what the budget is. People would have to, we would have to have nominees for all of the positions. So people would have to commit in advance to being nominated for that. They'd have to nominate themselves. We'd have to know that far enough in advance to have it be part of the warning and to be printed in the town report, et cetera. On the day of town meeting day, people would come into the office and they would vote a paper ballot like they do for any other election. And it would be yes or no on all the various articles. There would be an article on, do you want to, assuming there was only one nomination, do you want to elect Guy Tanza as the town clerk? Yes or no. Who do you want to, town treasurer, delinquent taxes, stuff like that, select board, lister, all these various things. And the budget, it would be the recycling article for whatever amount we end up coming up with. That would be a yes or no vote.
Yep.
A week to 10 days before that, we would hold an informational hearing.
Yep.
Where people could come and ask questions about the various things. But nothing can be changed at the informational hearing. It is merely an informational hearing. So people can ask questions to clarify points about whatever, why is this in the budget, or why is there this appropriation, to inform how they will then vote on the strict paper ballot on town meeting day. So that's what the Australian ballot would be like.
Yep.
And then option two that I laid out would be doing a normal physical town meeting. However, we would have to adhere to state health department regulations as far as social distancing and other stuff and capacity, et cetera.
You have to go into three.
So,
I remember.
And number 3 is to do it outside.
Right. Well, to me,
not deciding anything, but what are your thoughts at the moment?
Okay, number 3 is a non-starter. I don't want to even entertain it. Number 2, it's a possibility. I'm sure it's going to be told to us by the governor as to what we can do and what we can't do. We leave that open. Number 1 is not going to make some people happy, but there's not a hell of a lot we can do. And I just don't want to see one thing. I don't want to see the onus being put on you, Dave, or this select board because we have to do that. So we're going to have to be kind of firm that way. We're going to have to plan it, make sure that if we go that route, that we notify people for 2, 3, 4 weeks in advance, whatever we need to do, and tell them about the informational meeting, send out a letter, do the communication part. If there's any questions, leave a select board meeting open so that people can ask what's going on. Like you, we don't want to see anybody get upset, but this is a tough time and we're trying to make the best of it. But lastly, and most importantly, I think, is like I said last time, I think the governor is going to have the last call on all this. He hasn't said anything right now because he's dealing with stuff going down his pipe like a rocket. So I still pretty much watch every one of those governor meetings that he has online and on television, and he's going through a ton of garbage right now. So I don't think he's put that in the front of his mind yet. And when that time comes, I think that time will come pretty shortly. He's going to realize he's going to have to react. So I think. Let
me just say one thing about that, though, that in defense of, or whatever, not defense, but in the exchanges that I've had with legislators, both our legislators and also a couple of the legislators who chair the committees that decided not to allow online meetings or virtual meetings, I believe that there's a strong feeling among people that giving towns the ability to decide, like we can now, we have the ability as a select board to decide that we're going to have town meeting by Australian ballot. Normally, we wouldn't have that option. That would only be an option if it was voted at town meeting. I think a lot of those people feel that is the solution.
Okay.
They seem surprised that I initially expressed concern about the feasibility of us having our town meeting by Australian ballot.
They seem surprised.
I thought about it more. I'm coming over to their side, so maybe they were right.
They were surprised.
It would be not quite the solution that some of them may have thought it was. Okay, let's give everybody else a chance. Gwen, what's your thinking about it at the moment?
Well, I think with the circumstances that they are and the research that you and Guy and others have done, that it sounds like the Australian ballot might be the way to go and might be the safest for the town. You know, it might take a little extra work, but we're all willing to work and help you with whatever we have to do.
Yeah,
I mean,
good point.
We have a choice right now.
Good point.
No, and I think your point about it being, and that is certainly also something that I've more come to the realization of, that, you know, it would be, I think, of the options, it would be the safest for the townspeople, which is not a small thing to be concerned about. Let's keep going around. Shelby, now that you're a little more familiar with what we talked about before and what we're looking at now, what are your thoughts at the moment about these options?
I'm team Australian ballot all the way. The town I grew up in actually used to do, we had town meeting day. So, you know, you'd elect a moderator, all of the articles that, you know, always brought about discussion, like the budgets and things like that, happened during the town meeting and by vote at the town meeting with the group there. But for the rest of the elected officials, there was everyone had to put in their nominations prior. Everyone was on a ballot. And so the participation in the vote on all of the elected officials in the town and the ability for people to be on the ballot, even if they couldn't get off work that day, everything was already lined up in advance. So everyone was already confirmed whether or not they were even interested in it because they had to be on the ballot in advance. And the participation in the voting for the town officials was extremely high, even when the participation at town meeting was probably only like, maybe 30% of the town, but the participation in the Australian ballot, because they would trickle in throughout the day, was closer to 80%. So I've always been a fan of the Australian ballot for the elected officials of the town, especially because it does have that requirement and puts that onus on people providing their names for nomination in advance. So you can have multiple people, and that creates a culture where you beforehand, it's not like you show up to town meeting day and sort of like, oh, I guess maybe, or it has to be somebody who's there if they hadn't already expressed an interest to somebody who was there, in advance.
Right.
It's not this sort of word of mouth thing or whether or not you're present. So I love the idea of Australian ballots in general. And I think that COVID, for all of the awful things that are happening and because of it, could be a good opportunity to see how having an Australian ballot could affect participation in our town. So I'm sort of like excited. It could be an opportunity to see what this might do. Kind of in the same way that absentee ballots, it was interesting to see how that affected voter participation at a much bigger level. But yeah, I mean, I think it'd be a good experiment, and I think it also is the safest option. So it could be a necessity, but also a great opportunity.
Those are all really good points. Joseph,
that's a way to think about it.
Joseph joined us partway into that discussion. Joseph, I'm not sure exactly when you joined on, but if you couldn't tell, we're talking about town meeting again. And the options that I sort of boiled down to essentially option one being Australian ballot, option in no particular order, but that we have to decide now. Option two being a physical town meeting indoors somewhere. Option three being a physical meeting outdoors. What's your thinking again this week about where you stand on what you think we might want to do?
Yeah, I think, I caught most of the conversation. For one, I guess just in sort of question or / response to what Bruce was saying about the governor, and I didn't hear the whole conversation about the governor or the legislators. I'd be curious if the governor actually can mandate anything, or if that would have to fall all on the legislators. So I think that, again, I would say I don't think we can really rely on the governor making any sort of mandate as much as he would like to help. But I guess personally, I don't think indoors is a good thing to plan on. I think a lot of this, if you could make a snap decision in less than a week, then maybe it would be nice to say indoors is on the table. But looking at it now and looking at it when we have to make the decision, I don't think indoors can be on the table. And as much as I like the idea of having an outdoor meeting, again, we can't really make a snap decision. So I think trying to plan a month out, who knows if it's going to rain, and then that would kind of be off the table. And then also hearing what Shelby had to say, a lot of those are really good points. And I think it'd be kind of difficult to do Australian ballot, but there may be a lot of benefits aside from just getting through a town meeting during COVID. There might be a lot of benefits to it. So I'd say I'm leaning that way now.
Okay.
Good points with that. And then Joseph, I hadn't really thought of it in these terms, but I think your point about just given the situation, the one option that we can actually plan for and implement that we know would be a safe one is to go with Australian ballot. It also has the advantage of we could control all of it, whereas we can't necessarily control the situation around any of the other options at this point.
Exactly. I guess I started that thought with saying we can't, plan for the other ones. I didn't finish, but exactly. That's the Australian ballot. Really, the only thing that we can put into action, several, a month or two out. So.
Right. And to Shelby's points it actually has benefits that, once you get past what seems like the inconvenience of it, and it will be challenging for us to do this because we've never done
Dave?
it.
Dave, I have a question.
Yes. Yep.
What would be the procedure so everybody would have to go around and ask if somebody wanted to run for a certain office, like the listers or town clerk or
Select board.
any of them?
Well,
how do you get to be willing to do that? So who's going to be on a committee to go around and get the information for all of these board things that are open?
I have to. Right. Yeah. I think for starters, and maybe now, maybe there's enough of a consensus that it's worth investigating. I think the first thing we need to figure out, and I guess I'd ask, maybe this is something, Guy, that I could ask you to reach out to, maybe just Newfane's clerk, to find out how other towns do it. My assumption, I know that the legislature has waived certain, under normal circumstances, I believe that if you vote by Australian ballot, in order to be nominated for a position on that ballot, you have to have 5 signatures or something. That's been waived by the legislature. So people don't have to get signatures on a petition in order to put themselves forward for a position. I believe what most towns do, but I'm going to ask Guy if he can maybe check into this with some other towns who do this, is they advertise it. They put it out on the listserv, they put it out on Front Porch Forum, they probably post it in posting places to say, these are all of the positions that are up for election this year.
They have to present a consent form, not a
Right, they still have to sign a consent form, right? But they no longer have to have you did literally, prior to what the legislature changed, you did literally have to get some signatures as well. You don't have to do that, but you still have to submit a consent form. But as far as how you to Gwen's point, I think the first thing that you probably do is publicize it and advertise it as best you can amongst the voters to say, first to say, we're going to be voting by Australian ballot this year. And here are the things that you need. Here are the positions that are going to be up for election. We need people to nominate themselves. And when nobody responds, then
we react.
Have to start calling people and soliciting well in advance people to do this. And the other thing I'll add about the Australian ballot portion of it is, prior to doing any of that advertising, we as a select board need to put that on an agenda and vote to have our town meeting in 2021 by Australian ballot. That has to be a well-publicized decision and vote that the public is able to attend if and when we do that.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Can people do like a write-in? How would that work?
I assume so.
Write-ins are always available.
Yeah, presumably that's an option for anything. I guess I would say we'd like to hopefully avoid there being any positions where we don't have anyone nominated and people can only write in. Yeah, and it's entirely possible that somebody might get written in. The other thing that we need to keep in mind about the Australian ballot situation is, since there will be no discussion at the point of voting.
Right.
You know, we have to vote everything that way. We have to vote the budget that way.
Yep.
We have to
Yep.
vote the appropriations that way.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
All of the articles. So do I think it's likely that the budget is going to get voted down? No. But I think it becomes more of a likelihood than it probably would if we were having a physical town meeting. So there are some, you know, there could be
Dave?
some unforeseen circumstances that come out of it, but whatever, we'd have to deal with those.
Dave?
Yeah, Bruce.
Look, you know, that's what the informational meeting's about. And then they can vote which way they want at that point. So, you know, the informational meeting will be involving all the select board people, obviously, and probably you too, Guy. And at that point in time, if anybody's got a concern, they'll know in advance, look, you got any beefs, this is when you need to come and bring it, because this is a special year.
Right. Although the thing that I think it's important to note is nothing can be changed at that informational meeting. So if, let's just say for the sake of argument that there's an appropriation mixed in with all of the standard appropriations that someone has a huge concern about, there's no facility within the structure for anyone to amend anything.
Okay, couldn't we send out,
informational meeting, they can ask all the questions they want, and we can clarify why things are the way they are, but nothing can be changed about the ballot at that
Of course, but couldn't we beforehand send out, like we do with the booklet, send out information saying this is what's coming up, and leave it for a week. I'll have it a week or 10 days before the last select board meeting, before we have the virtual meeting online for the information meeting, so that we can take input. So if anybody wants to bitch, there's their time, and we can change it if we think it's constructive or whatever. But obviously, like you,
I don't want to go too heavily into this, but the deadlines, the statutory deadline, which, you know, maybe something might change about these, but again, I don't think that since the legislature doesn't even meet again until January, I don't think it's likely that things will change that will help us. The way we have to post the warned article, which is essentially in this scenario would be the ballot, at least 30 days, but not more than 40 days prior to the town meeting. So that's the beginning of February.
Yes.
At the end of January.
Ooh.
So there isn't a lot of time for doing anything other than picking a direction and going with it and hoping
Dave, we
the informational meeting, by the way, the informational meeting can't happen, is not allowed to happen more than 10 days prior to town meeting. So we have to have the informational meeting. I understand your point about encouraging people to come to select board meeting, but we're going to have a warned specific informational meeting about this ballot anyway, quite frankly. So, which can be virtual. But I mean, I think and I think, I know I'm bringing up all these things about things being voted down or whatever. And I really think, I doubt that there's really much that's going to be different about people's approach to the particulars of town meeting than they ever are, whether they're having to physically come and vote or whether we'd be doing it in person. And to your point, the informational meeting in advance, when people can ask questions and we can explain why the budget is the way it is, I think will be all the information and the satisfaction that most anybody will need. So I don't mean to make it sound like we're going to create all these challenges that we aren't. But we are going to have to do a lot more things a lot sooner than we are used to in this town. This first time anyway.
Basically, we're in uncharted waters.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
There'll be some mistakes, but for the most part, if we have the time, which we do right now, to start planning for an Australian ballot. I think that's going to be the way to go. And in fact, it may prove to be something that people in the town like.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, and to Shelby's point, it gives everybody an opportunity to vote on these things, which we know from our experiences at town meeting that the vast majority of people in this town don't actually vote on this. They don't come
It's
to town
private.
meeting. So
It's private.
it's much more of a chance. Gwen, any other thoughts on this at the moment?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. Shelby, any other thoughts on this for the moment?
No, I mean, I think that nobody would say that voting the budget by Australian ballot is ideal, but I think that voting by Australian ballot this year is going to be our best option, and that anything that does come up or any kinks, I think that we're well equipped to handle it. So I think we should just, I mean, I would be all in favor for putting that forward to vote on at some point, so we can get started in the planning process.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Joseph, any last thoughts from you?
Yeah, the biggest thing I would say is I would agree with Shelby that if we are going to do this, I think that we need to decide on it awfully quickly. That way we can, if at very least in an unofficial capacity, start spreading the word and maybe getting some people lined up specifically to that may be interested in putting their name up for certain positions.
Mm-hmm. But I know that I said the last thoughts, but you guys raise a good point, and now I'm thinking we should circle back to this. So let me just take a quick poll. I think we should actually probably consider putting on the agenda for the December 16th. The December 16th meeting, town meeting, and that we are considering, we're going to consider voting by having town meeting by Australian ballot, and actually prepare and assume that we are going to vote up or down on that on December 16th. Bruce, any concerns about pulling the trigger at that point?
I don't think so, unless you want to call the governor's office and find out any more information, but you've obviously been in touch with the legislators. The only thing that I can say, no, I don't think I have an opposition to that, but I say, but once we do, we should send a letter out to the town saying, this is what's going to happen. If you want to put input, or you have any ideas, or you want to be nominated for something, now's the time to think about it. You have X amount of select board meetings left. We're going to be we're pulling the plug now to have that. And by the time we get to mid to late January, we're going to be putting the books together and following that course, and having the virtual information meeting at whatever date. But as long as we notify everybody in advance, I think we should do it by mail and let everybody know, and on Julie's website, and pass the word as well. I think we're going the right approach.
Okay, well, we can, I guess I'll say that after if and when we've decided that we're doing this, and maybe also with some input that I'm going to ask Guy to try to get from other towns that have done this about what their process is, then I think we can have more of a discussion about how we actually communicate it out and what our actual process is after that.
Okay.
Gwen, do you have any concerns with putting this on the agenda to vote up or down on the 16th?
Nope.
Shelby, any concerns about that?
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting. No concerns.
Joseph, any concerns about doing that?
Nope, I think it's an excellent idea.
Okay. One thing that I'll add, hang on one second, Guy. One thing that I'll add that I didn't have a chance to do, but I am going to do between now and the next meeting, is I'm going to talk to Dave Parker and just bring him up to speed on what we've been talking about.
Good idea.
I just want to make sure if he has any thoughts about it, and I'll invite him to come to the next meeting when we're discussing it as well, because I know we all do value his input on all of that, and I want to make sure he's included in that.
Okay.
Guys, so sorry. That was the point you were going to make. Okay.
It's important that he's involved because he's the moderator.
Right. Okay, so we will, all right, so we'll move
What
forward.
did Guy
Thank
say?
you.
I couldn't hear him.
He also wanted to make sure that Dave Parker was brought up to speed and included in the discussion, since, you know, he's our moderator and he's, you know, devoted a lot of time and energy to this over the years and has a lot of great input on a lot of things. So
plus your former select board chair.
I'm gonna reach out to him, and I'll also invite him to the next meeting to discuss it with it. Yes, that would be my intention as well. Yeah. Okay. Any last thoughts before we move on? Going once, twice.
David, Mark. I was wondering, I'm taking in everybody's ideas here, and I'm thinking that a remote, if you were to get your town report out, is there any way to get it out a little sooner than you normally do? And if you could go around and gather nominees of people who are interested in filling positions in town, like we vote on, and do a one ballot, you know, it'd be the same as Australia, and have a yes, no, when the budget numbers are there, do they agree, yes, no, and then the select persons. So you would go, just like we did the presidential election, you'd go in the office one at a time, go through, fill out your paper, hand it in, and it gets tallied. Would that be?
That's what it is.
That's essentially what we would be doing. That's the way it would work. Right, exactly. So it would just be exactly. It'd be like a normal presidential election or school election or whatever. And the town report, the town report, like it does now, it contains the warning, which is normally just the subjects for discussion at town meeting. In this instance, the warning in the town report will literally be the same nominations and stuff that appears on the paper ballot that people vote on when they come into the town office.
Okay. Yep.
Cool. Yep. Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for all your thoughts on that. That's, I will say that I feel much less bothered by the whole prospect of the town meeting than I did a few weeks ago when I first started thinking about it. So hopefully that's progress for me anyway. Okay, moving on to 7B, building update. Let's try to, I'm not going to set the same timer that I did on Samara, but
forget it.
Maybe we
got two major problems. I'm going to have to speak my piece. I'll do it as quickly as I can, but we got two very reoccurring problems. But I'll do the best I can. All right. The first one is, if you remember last time, we got a bill from Jeffers to clean the boilers last time for $521.74. At that time, Joey, when I met them for the first 5 minutes and left just to touch bases with them what I needed, was really standoffish to me. And this was after them calling me up to make an appointment to do it, which I was going to do. They didn't meet the appointment, didn't call me back. Then I called them, and then we changed the appointment for 10 days later. In as much as that, I thought I was getting off easy for $521.74. In the 30 years that I've had my oil furnace, I have never once had more than one person in that building. They had 3 people there. Okay, they left, did it, I left, then they completed with their work. I get an email from Olivia, I believe it was the late afternoon or first thing in the morning, there's no heat in 2 rooms. She had already contacted Jeffers. They came back in and hit us with another bill for $719.57. I don't know what was on that bill. Maybe Guy can answer that question because I physically haven't seen that bill. Guy, do you remember what's on that bill? The second one?
Al Jeffers, no, Jeffers.
This
I
is
can't hear
the
him.
inspection report. Hang on. Well, hang on a second. It's in the AP warrant.
Yeah, okay.
It's in the description is right there.
All right, hang on.
It's in the same position as it is on the front. So if it says Al Jeffers.
Yep, I see it. I'm just looking for which, so there's, which invoice are you looking at? You want to know?
This one, I believe it's the first one. It says 7/19/57.
Yeah, it says no heat call, replaced circulator.
Just says replace.
$200.
Dave?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're cutting out. What does it say for circulator? Just circulator?
Yep. It's a
That's all it says.
0011F cartridge circulator for $519.
Woo! Okay.
Call for $200.
Okay. Then after that, Guy calls me up the day after Thanksgiving and says, we got another bill for $1,238.34 for a Grundfos circular pump, which is one of the two that are behind the boiler, and which one of them was leaking, and they supposedly replaced a gasket, and that was on the first bill. I did have that first bill, and it says taco vent on it, so I don't have the second bill. So my problem is, in all those instances, I was never called, and I had a conversation with Tim Jeffers after the cleaning, or right around that time, and for over 20 minutes how to contact him. He knows me, I know him, I've dealt with him plenty. Never received a call from these people. So it took me an entire 24 hours to cool off because I was ready to hit the freaking roof. I mean, this is just incredible that they just don't tell you what they're doing. Let's suppose you go in for something to have your car fixed, and they're telling you, well, it's going to be about $200 or $300, and they hit you for a $1,500 bill. You're pissed. Well, I'm pissed, and this is what I did. I didn't change anything. I didn't change anything for on-call for Jeffers, but this is what I did. I called Pete Noble up. Now, also, Dampier Electric hasn't called me back. It's been close to a month since we got everything straightened out that they were going to come in and do some electrical and straighten out the heat there. I found out from Pete Noble that it's more like an HVAC system situation. So I called Pete Noble a couple of days ago, and he came in for an hour and a half with me yesterday, and we looked at everything. He fixed the heat in the big room, and we were really having a hard time deciding what they did. He couldn't understand. I said to him, wait a minute, Pete. I know they replaced the Grundfos pump because of the $1,200 bill the day after Thanksgiving, but I also thought I saw that they changed a taco pump. I went home and got my original bill, came back, and the taco vent was on. So I thought, well, he says there's no taco circulator here. And there's one little one that seems to be above, what do you call it? Escapes me, but the inlet and outlet to that little pump was shut off, and that would be the only taco pump in the whole system. I asked him twice, and we said no. He says there's no other one. So anyway, we got done, and I've come to a solution. I think I asked him if he would help us out in HVAC situations. I'm having a hard time getting I'm going to have a hard time getting somebody to come in an emergency situation. I also called Rick from Rick's Propane that just put the heaters in the school, in the church, excuse me. And I haven't received a response back from him yet, Dave. What I'm trying to do is see if I can get a commitment from him to service the propane part. I pretty much got commitment from Pete to help us out with the heating part, but the problem is the on-call crap, and I'm trying to work that out. Okay, does anybody have any questions about what I just said? Any concerns? But
I have one quick question.
Go ahead.
Did you contact them to question the bill and see if there was a logical explanation for why we were billed for stuff that doesn't seem like it added up? Like, just in case it was an administrative error where the wrong charges got assigned to the bill on our account for that date? I mean, did you approach them at all about that?
No, I
Before going
didn't.
down this
I thought
rabbit
about
hole?
it, but it was pretty specific that it said Grundfos bill, a Grundfos pump, and I knew what they were talking about. So I could call back Tim and ask this whole thing. I think you're pertaining to that $719 bill. I could call back and ask them, how come after $521 and 3 people, we had no heat, and then it ended up to be $719 the very next morning. I could do that. Another thing to answer your question, kind of answer your question, is that we looked at both pumps. The one that they didn't replace, Pete Noble goes up to it and wiggles the wire to it. And the wire basically is a 3-wire, 240-volt wire that hooks up to it. He wiggles. He was able to make the panel, the LED panel, shake and not work right. He actually ended up taking the cover off that, putting the old module that was in the old Grundfos pump that they had taken out, put it in, replaced it, and got it to work. So I don't know what they did or what was going on, but my issue up top still stays. They didn't mention to me at all any of this. They just responded, didn't say, call me up and communicate. So if you all want me to call Tim Jeffers and ask him what was this about the $719 bill and for why, I can do that.
Well, I guess one thing I guess what I'd say to Shelby's point is that if there are details on the invoice that you don't either understand or think might not be accurate, we should question them.
Okay.
But then to the other point, if you had an agreement with Jeffers that they were going to contact you before going out to work on anything, and they're not holding up to that, then we need to escalate that. I mean, or work to get away from them as a vendor. I mean, if you agreed with Al or whoever that they were going to do this and they're not doing it, we should hold them to what they told you they were going to do.
To be fair, that agreement never existed. Okay. They've been on call on infinitum. This has never happened, though, where we've had a situation where they came in with 3 people, $521 bill, and then the very next morning, another $700 bill. So maybe that should be questioned or contested or whatever. And I don't know why they replaced that Grundfos. Oh, excuse me. I forgot one point. Olivia's had an ongoing issue with water hammering. So that's probably the reason why he replaced that pump. But I don't know if it was cracked, broken, what caused it. And Pete Noble, Pete really knows his stuff. We were having a real hard time figuring out what they did that caused it. Now I had the bills in my hand. In fact, I went back and got the first bill and came back to Susie's just to go over it with them. I didn't have the second one, but I had the third one's easiest. I replaced the pump for $1,200. But to your second point, Dave, that's the approach I want to go. I'm really gun shy with these people. They just don't make me feel warm and fuzzy. Big, huge bills, no explanations. So I'm pursuing the approach that I set up top. I'm going to see if I can get people to commit themselves to us that seem to care a little bit more. That might be a little bit more.
Can I say something?
Yep, absolutely.
I just kind of agree that we need to get in touch with them. And it's a little surprising to me that you'll discuss their bill with another vendor before calling them up and talking to them about it. And I mean, this is something that you've done several times to certain vendors while we've had these meetings, where you have a narrative that goes on and puts them in a very negative light. And then when we ask questions, you you know, it comes out you never had some sort of agreement with them that they would call you and that they broke that agreement. But you went on for so long about how they didn't get in touch with you, and that left a bad feeling, or you don't understand what they're doing. I just think it's a little disrespectful to paint these people like they're trying to rip us off. And you're talking about how you went over this in depth with another vendor, and that vendor thinks they don't know what they're doing, but you haven't even had a conversation with them. And they very well may be doing something that's not up to par on this, but I know that they're good people, and, you know, they're not, I would rest on faith that they're not trying to rip us off. So to paint them in a public meeting like this, like they're trying to do something wrong, it seems awfully disrespectful to me.
Well, I'm just trying to make a change because I don't feel comfortable with them. That's my bottom line.
But you haven't, I understand that, and you've been doing all the work. But, I mean, those couple points that I had about, you'll discuss it with the competition of theirs at length. You'll discuss their bill at length with a competition of theirs who's clearly, at no fault of his own, trying to steal their clients. But you won't even get on the phone and talk to them, and then you come to a meeting and you disparage them in front of all of us as well as the public record. And it, like I said, I find it to be awfully disrespectful.
Okay, let's hear what everybody else thinks.
Say something.
Let's hear what everybody else thinks.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say something, because
okay.
here's the
thing. We're not going to belabor this. I'll be honest. What I will say is, I mean, I would maybe describe it a little bit differently than Joseph, but I do agree with Joseph's point, Bruce, just that not just from a respect standpoint from the vendor, but just factually, they should be able to defend and explain why they did something, and they should have the opportunity to do that. You know what I mean?
I'll call them tomorrow.
If we have concerns about work they did, we should give them the opportunity to explain to you why they did that work. The explanation might not be satisfactory to you, and that's okay, but they should have that chance at least.
I'll call them tomorrow. I'll see if I can get some answers from them and report back to you 2 weeks from now what they said. That's the best I can do at this point, and pursue what I just said before.
Yeah. Okay. And I think that's fair. Is there other?
Yes, there's a second problem happening,
okay.
And that's the water system. And Scott and Bovat and I've been back and forth about this a bit, and we haven't really concluded what's going on, but we're starting to have a problem with that water system. It's starting to, in fact, they supposedly, you see 2 bills there that they've had to come in because the water system's acting up. And we had a discussion about possibly changing the system, going to a chlorination system or something. And I explained to him quite specifically that the reason why, obviously the reason why we picked up in the first place, because it was there, and we'd like to save $20,000 bucks. But he hasn't called me back yet, and he said he'd call me back 2 days ago. So we're trying to work this out where this thing doesn't start acting and costing us a lot of money. Let me also say that I had a discussion with Nancy Burke about this system months and months ago, and she said the town of Townsend had the same system, and they dumped it and changed it for something else because it was given so much maintenance. So I think what I need to do is to discuss it with Scott and find out what's going to go on going forward, and present all to you some kind of an alternative, because as far as we're starting to have a problem. And all it does is make sure that our water in that building doesn't fail every time Nancy goes in. Before that was hooked up, I believe it's 2018. Before that, a couple of times before that, we stopped
Bruce,
having any issues with.
Bruce,
Oh,
your phone is cutting in and out a little bit. I don't know if you're...
Okay, how's that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done anyway. 2017, we stopped having bad water reports. So it was after that we hooked that system up. So Scott and I are figure out a better path forward, because I was in there yesterday and we were still having a little cloudiness in those tubes. You could see it in the color of the monitor. So haven't really got determined what we're going to do at that point, but I'll let you know.
Okay, cool. All right, thanks, Bruce.
Uh-huh.
Okay, moving on to updates. Mr. Tanza, what's going on?
The town office is still being, used as a call for appointments, and we have the voicemail and the website. But it has slowed down just a tick for now, and I think that was with the holidays. But we're still seeing a lot of property transfers or refinancings and so forth that are going on. And other than that, we're getting more the end of the year, the elections, and all the reports that we have to do.
Thank you very much. Mark, what's going on with you?
Okay, since I've seen everybody last, finally received a call for the line striping guy, and he said he would be in. He said he liked to work in the nighttime for less traffic. I told him Brookline didn't have a lot of traffic, but anyway, he asked if I would paint lines in the center of the road for him to target, and he came through and striped Hill Road and Putney Mountain, and hopefully that was okay with everybody, how it came out. And yeah, I think it makes a big difference. It was pretty well faded where it was, and of course the new pavement definitely needed. So I thought it was exceptional. So other than that, I've been doing some sign work, replacing some signs, straightening up signs, been checking the roads after each of our storms that pass through. Everything's holding up pretty good. It's a little bit of potholing on some of the dirt roads. Talked to Archie about it. We hate to scrape with the grader this time of year because it creates soft mud roads if you loosen it up this time of year. So we're going to let it go. It sounds like the weather is gradually cooling down to where things are going to tighten up for the duration of the winter. Also, I was going to bring it up. I should probably bring it to the treasurer, but I received a call from the milling company that milled our pavement, and there was he said that the person on their end never received payment for the milling that was done back in the fall. So I was gonna see if I could pass that on to.
Yeah, Guy has a thought about that, Mark.
Yeah, Mark, I had a conversation with Brian from Arlington Paving, and the invoice for $12,178.25 has not been received. And I had Samara check in with it also today, and she was in conversation with Brian, or she left a voicemail with him asking him to submit another invoice.
Okay, very good. I appreciate that. Yep. Okay, and then the only other what I was going to ask Guy, do you know if the same truck driver delivers and takes away our recycle bins every time, or is it different truck drivers?
It's different drivers. It's not always the same guy.
Okay.
Some guys are better than the others. But,
yeah. Yeah. All right. I just was wondering if it turned out to be the same driver each time, maybe we could set up a deal with him on a padlock system, but that answers my question on that. The only other thing that I I received another phone call from Mrs. Birch on Parker Road, and I may have overstepped my authority on Parker Road as being a town road. Over the years, I just assumed that Parker Road was a town road clear to the turnaround point of our snow removal and where the grader can turn around. And B inquired with me. She likes to hike or walk on Parker Road on a daily routine, and she asked me if Parker Road was private or a town road, and I said I'm quite certain that it's a town road that we maintain. And then she asked about beyond the gate at the end of Parker Road where we maintain, and I said I wasn't clear on that there was no houses beyond, and that the landowner owns both sides of the road on the old town trail going through there, and I wasn't sure how that was left as town trail or if it's thrown up to the landowner now is responsible for the land as the old town trail. So anyway, I feel like I may have overstepped my boundary of clarifying the town road out to the gate. It appears that Parker property has been sold. There's new owners, and they don't want anybody walking or hiking. It seems like beyond Greer Bridge. And so therefore, I wondered if I could gather some clarification on the road to pass back to the Birch family, and for my own further information. If anybody,
Yes.
Guy, do you have a
Yeah, the
good
town
view of that?
It is a town road up to the Parker, Mr. Parker's residence. And he was kind enough to put a turnaround up there many years ago so that the town equipment could plow the road and turn around and safely return. Going forward from that point on was part of the old ancient roads. And at the time, the town had an option to do something with the old ancient roads, and it was determined that it was far too expensive, so they just kind of threw them up. And the bottom line is that property is owned by the Parkers, or was owned by the Parkers, and when they conveyed the land to the new owners, that's still in the same, it's in the same vein, that is private land. Did I make myself clear?
okay. Well, yes, it's just, we're to maintain clear to the turnaround, and I guess as the town road persons, we have permission to come and go through there for maintenance purposes, and we turn around at the gate. So I guess beyond the gate is not really our problems have been, but yeah. So anyway, if I need to call back Interfire to let them know where the town road ends, because I'm unaware, to give somebody permission to be able to walk on a town road and then say that it's not passable. It's just a confusing issue.
Mr. Parker's had this conversation. David Parker Jr. had this conversation with Interfire on a number of occasions, and he was he went as far as to have the surveys done and everything else. That is private property. From the gate going west is private. That is not a town road, and it's not to be trespassed upon. Mr. Parker expressed that concern with the inner fire people prior to the sale, and when the sale went through, those are the same parameters. And I think
Okay.
that the inner fire people are looking to access that, but Mr. Parker said no, and I believe the new people that own it say no.
Okay. So it's fully purpose that I can continue my duties to the gate, and if that's the way that we go out and need that area to turn around at the gate. But if anybody should ask me, can I go up to that gate walking, or can I go up there, turn around? Is that considered, is that legitimate for somebody to go beyond Parker's driveway?
All right, you're
Other
asking
than-
for some technical answers, and I think that
I
I would
wouldn't-
look at the survey.
Yeah, Mark, I guess, I mean, I don't know how easy this is, but the simplest thing I think would be to say, if the landowner has posted that they don't want people trespassing, then as far as you're aware, that should be respected. It's not up to you.
Right.
It's not up to you to
Okay.
decide whether
Okay.
someone should ignore what has been posted by a landowner. You know what I mean? That puts you in
Yeah.
an unfair situation. So honestly,
Yeah, I mean,
I would suggest if B or other people have questions beyond that, encourage them
Right.
to contact Guy.
Okay. Very good.
Have them reach out to the town clerk.
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I was unclear after I heard that it was not town road beyond the driveway, so that clears it for me, and I will do as you said. So,
But yeah, it doesn't sound like anything about the transfer changes your functional maintenance of the road or anything. That doesn't
Okay.
change. Yeah.
Okay, very good. All right, so that's basically with what I've talked about, and you've answered my questions. The only other things I have more, some greater maintenance to do, and we have a bad battery that I'm going to replace. I have to get new batteries for the grader so that it'll be functional for the winter months if needed. And that's it at this time.
Cool. All right. Thanks very much, Mark.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to communications. Email wise, pretty much just stuff that we all saw and that we did. I'm looking to see whether this actually got to, yeah, it did. And the Perkins, Rick's invoice for the heating stuff at the meeting house got into the accounts payable warrant because that got sent to myself as well. Nothing really of substance beyond things we've already talked about email wise. Regular mail wise, Joseph, you got a very nice letter and some information from the Jehovah's Witnesses, which we'll leave here for you so that you can get back to them. We got a bulk solicitation from Newbrook Fire and Rescue. It's not an actual appropriation request, but it is a sort of bulk solicitation. Then we also got something from the Linda Taft Pratt Library in Dummerston, which is a general solicitation request, not an appropriation, but just bulk solicitation. And that's it for regular mail. Moving on to the pay orders. First up is the accounts payable warrant, which I have already signed last week. We'll go around. Bruce, do you have any questions on the accounts payable warrant?
No, I've seen it.
Payroll, sorry. Yeah, thanks, guys. Sorry, payroll warrant.
Oh, payroll warrant? Yes, I've seen
Any
that as
questions
well.
on- Okay. Gwen, any questions on the payroll warrant?
No,
Shelby, any questions on the payroll warrant?
Nope.
Joseph, any questions on the payroll warrant?
I'm not in a position to look at any of that stuff right now, so I'm gonna have to check it out later and abstain in the vote right now.
Okay. All right, then I'd like to make a motion that we approve payroll warrant 2020-75 dated November 25th, 2020 in the amount of $1,187.82. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Bruce. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving payroll warrant 2020-75 dated November 25th, 2020 in the amount of $1,187.82 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
One.
So one abstaining, and that is approved. Now moving on to the accounts payable warrant. Bruce, did you have any questions on the accounts payable warrant?
No, I don't. I've seen it.
Okay. Gwen, any questions on the accounts payable warrant?
no,
Shelby, any questions on the accounts payable warrant?
No, they were already addressed. Thanks.
Joseph, any questions on the accounts payable warrant?
Same answer.
Okay. Then I'd like to make a motion that we approve accounts payable warrant 2020-76 dated December 2nd, 2020 in the amount of $248,121.97. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Shelby. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving accounts payable warrant 2020-76 dated December 2nd, 2020 in the amount of $248,121.97 signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Are you really voting against this, Bruce?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So just let's go back and do a roll call vote for this, just to make sure everything's clear. So the motion is to approve accounts payable warrant 2020-76 dated December 2nd, 2020 in the amount of $248,121.97. David Jones, myself, I'm voting yes. Gwen, what is your vote on the motion?
yes,
Yes or no? Yes.
Yes.
Bruce, what is your vote on the motion?
No.
No. Okay. Shelby, what is your vote on the motion?
Yes.
Yes.
Are we? Never mind. Okay.
Joseph, what is your vote on the motion?
I will have to abstain until another time.
Okay. So that is approved 3-1 with one abstention. So the accounts payable warrant is approved. All right. That takes care of those. Moving on to setting the agenda for the next regular meeting, which will be December 16th. We will have the town meeting on there, and I'll specify that we will vote on whether to hold it by Australian ballot. We will have a discussion about the treasurer situation. We'll have the usual stuff. Any other things that you can think of for the agenda at the moment, Bruce?
No.
Gwen, any other suggestions for the agenda at the moment?
no,
Shelby, anything else for the agenda?
I don't know. Some of the stuff Joseph brought up rang true to some things that I tend to feel with how certain members of the board react to situations and people and represent us to the public. And I don't know if that would be a good conversation to have in a meeting or in a separate meeting or an executive session. But I do think it's something that becomes an underlying emotional current when we approach some of these situations. So I would like to, if there's time in the next meeting, to start a conversation about that.
Okay, what do we think we're calling that?
Conduct of town officers, public relations, just general decorum and language use.
How about we just call it meeting conduct?
Yeah, I mean, and it's not really, I think it's more about how people are representing us outside of meetings even, but also, yes, in meetings.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So whatever you want to put that in, I just think that it coming up tonight is a good opportunity.
It's your agenda item. You can call it whatever you want.
Oh, help me out, Dave. Give it a name.
Well, I'll say that if we're gonna, I don't want to preempt it, but if we're really going to get into a discussion of how people conduct themselves outside of the context of our meetings, I think that's going to be a challenging discussion. But
so then, how things are inside meeting conduct and yeah, that'll be a good starting point.
We'll call it meeting conduct as a starting point. Peter,
okay.
I see your hand raised. Do you have a suggestion?
I'm not a lawyer or anything, but I really think you might be talking about actionable speech. And it would be good to have a session on what constitutes legal exposure in a public meeting of the town. In other words, you guys could get sued for some things that you might say in a meeting.
Good point.
That'd be the issue. I mean.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I'll just say that I'll be brutally honest that I have so much on my plate right now that I'm not going to spearhead at this moment figuring out a discussion about this. But I'm more than happy to listen to someone else facilitate one. So we can put meeting conduct on and we can have a general discussion to start as a starting point. And then if people want to run with something from that point, they can. Anything else for the agenda, Shelby, other than that? Shelby? Is that a no? Probably a no. I was going to ask Joseph, but Joseph is no longer on the call.
I don't see Shelby on the list either. Oh, her iPhone is on.
I think her phone must have dropped out, or
she comes back
in the meeting but not connected to that. Joseph, is that you coming back in?
It is. And I was actually about to say something. I don't know what happened when.
I'm back.
What was that?
Okay, hang on. Sorry, Shelby's back also. Shelby got bounced out as well. Let's hang on. I'll get to you in a second, Joseph. Shelby, anything else for the agenda other than the meeting conduct discussion? Shelby. All right, let's assume for the moment not. Joseph, anything? So I don't know when you cut out, but we're adding
that's all. Thank you.
Meeting conduct discussion, the beginning of meeting conduct discussion to the agenda for next time.
The only thing that I suppose I'd like to add is, and I don't know what I missed, but not in an effort to be, non-transparent, but I think it might be more conducive to a productive discussion, and it just might be more appropriate all around if we have a discussion like that in something like, I don't know if it would be called executive session, but something that not necessarily a select board meeting. I do think it's an important discussion to have, but like I said, I think it just might be more productive if it's a discussion amongst just ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing I would say, since we're now in a public meeting and this is being webcast and recorded in various ways, is there are only certain circumstances under which we can go into executive session. And I'm not clear that a discussion of conduct is something that would qualify for any of those legitimate reasons for an executive session. And of course, with open meeting law, more than two of us can't have a discussion about anything related to any of this without being in violation of open meeting law also. So
okay, all right,
I'm not sure we have a choice. I get your point, and I completely agree with you, but in keeping with open meeting law, I don't see a way that we can have this anything other than in open meeting, unfortunately.
Okay. No, that, I guess I understand that, and I just wasn't 100% sure on what the process would be, but yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not 100% sure either, but erring as all of these things do on the side of assuming that it should be open, I think we probably, whatever conversation we have, I think is we just have in a normal meeting. And
okay.
Prior to it, we'll remind everybody of our various things that we've agreed to in the various meeting policies about being respectful and all that other stuff, and then we can take it from there. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to the agenda for next time?
Not that I can think of now.
Okay. All right. Then I would make a motion that we adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I couldn't hear who that was. Sorry. Who seconded?
Second.
Who actually just seconded? Sorry.
I did, Gwen.
Okay, Gwen did. Sorry. Thank you, Gwen. Sorry. Okay. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned at 8:40 p.m. I'm going to stop the recording. We will say goodbye.
I can't go there.